All right. File item 3, AB 259 by Assembly Member DeBobnay. If you would come join us. And let's see if we can't get some members to come join us too, please. It's just us chickens here. Good afternoon, Assemblyman.
Madam Chair, members, under California data breach notification law, agencies are required to provide a security breach notice to anyone impacted by a data breach if the personal information breach is unencrypted. AB 259 will require a state agency to include within the security breach notification an offer of identity theft prevention services for a minimum of 12 months if the breach data includes unencrypted social security numbers and driver's license numbers. This measure follows up on a recent enacted legislation that applied the same exact requirements to businesses throughout our state. Whether a state agency suffers a breach or a business, those affected by this breach should receive the same amount of protection. Public agencies are not immune to data breaches. Just last year, the DMV suffered a data breach, and in 2013, the Employment Development Department suffered a breach, which included unencrypted social security numbers. In addition, this year, the United States Office of Personnel Management announced a massive data breach, including social security numbers of over 21 million individuals. The OPM is now offering 3 years of monitoring and protection services to those 21 million government employees that were affected. A breach resulting in the release of unencrypted social security or driver's license numbers can lead to identity theft. We've seen it in the news countless times in the last couple of years, forcing consumers to monitor their personal information for years to come. If this is because of the breach happening at a state agency, that onerous burden should not fall on the constituents of ours throughout the state, but rather on the agencies and government to protect them. Should a consumer suffer a data breach, whether at the agency or a business, this measure will ensure the necessary protections are in place to help prevent that they become a future victim of identity theft. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Witnesses, 2 witnesses, 2 minutes each, please.
Madam Chair, members, Jeremy Merzmath, the California Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, both public and private entities are victims of data breaches. Whether a consumer gets the mitigation services shouldn't be dependent on whether their information was housed in a public or private entity. So we are supportive of this bill and thank the Assembly member for bringing it.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support.
Rodney Wilson with the California Credit Union League, also in strong support.
Very good. Thank you. Other witnesses in support, if you'd come up to the mic, name, rank, serial number, please.
Madam Chair, members, Oliver Rockroy with the California Association of Life and Health Insurance Companies, also in support.
Thank you.
Margaret Gladstein on behalf of the California Retailer Association in support.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Senators. Julianne Broyles here on behalf of the California Association of Joint Powers Authorities. We, on the issue of policy, really actually agree with the fact that the monitoring needs to occur. Our biggest issue comes with the funding of the monitoring by local government. When the law already requires us to do notification of breaches, we are happy to do that. We are doing that, and we are complying with that. But when our local public entities have to pay for that, we need to figure out where those dollars are coming from. In other committees, we have asked for the same thing, that there be funding to follow this bill to pay for that monitoring. So far, that has not occurred, and until that does, we cannot remove our opposition. I think one of the other points that we do want to ensure, too, is that there needs to be clarity on the issue of where the liability ends, because of our operations interact with so many other systems, whether it's at the state, federal, or city level. If one of their another local government or a state government or a federal government breach occurs, how far does our liability extend as to the monitoring? I think that needs clarification. For that reason, we're asking for a no vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members. Faith Conley with the California State Association of Counties. We just jumped on last week in opposition. I apologize for our late addition. I'll agree with my previous colleague who spoke. This is a cost issue for us, but I do have a couple of more issues that I wanted to outline pretty quickly for you. She did bring up the interconnectedness issue. A lot of federal and state agencies, that includes DMV, Department of Justice, Child Protective Services, DSS, require us to connect our systems to theirs. If there's a data breach along that chain of command, if a county is used as the source of a data breach to get to possibly 10 million driver's licenses within a DMV access point, are we on the hook for paying the coverage for credit monitoring for all of those citizens that have been violated by that data breach? That opens us up to huge costs. That could bankrupt a lot of our counties. We would prefer that the bill be amended to make sure that counties are only have to provide that credit monitoring for systems that are completely within our control. Also, AB 259 doesn't specify what appropriate protection is. This could mean anything at any point for any data breach. If that varies, if that is used expansively, then again, we could be on the hook for millions, if not billions of dollars of costs. So for those reasons, we do ask for amendments going forward. We look forward to working with the author on possible amendments to address our concerns. We do have an opposed unless amended position on this bill. So for those reasons, I request your opposition.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition?
Alicia Lewis of the League of California Cities in opposition.
Is there someone else?
Hi, I'm late support. Dolores Duran Flores, California School Employees Association, we're in support.
Okay, you're out of order, but fine. Assembly Member DeBabney. DeBabney, I got it.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Teresa Cook on behalf of the Retail Industry Leaders Association in strong support. Thank you.
Yeah, we're taking opposition right now. Thank you.
No, I apologize.
Yeah, better to apologize and ask for forgiveness. I get it. Floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Vice Chair, and I would say colleagues, but I'll leave it at Mr. Vice Chair, I think, at this point. But
I did shower today.
No, I will tell you, a common mistake of this building is holding the private sector to a higher standard than we hold ourselves in government to. This bill remedies that. When you think about being a victim of identity theft or having your private information compromised and the hassle and burden that puts on constituents throughout our state, it should be no different if that happened at a local retail establishment, a financial institution, or at a state agency. One could even make the argument that the protections at state agencies should be higher. Just to quickly address some of the concerns posed by the worthy opposition at the table today, current law already outlines that it is the holders of that information that are responsible. No one says the DMV is responsible for driver's license numbers that were taken during a data breach at Target, nor would local governments be responsible for information taken from another agency. This bill clearly states that, and current law clearly states that. If the breach happens at the DMV will be responsible. If the breach happens at EDD, the EDD will be responsible. As for funding, that will have to come through the budget, but I don't think it's I don't think as a member of the government that we represent our constituents in a way that is fair and thoughtful to say, because we have not, decided exactly how it's going to be paid for, we should not provide these protections to our constituents who have to provide personal information to these agencies to get services. And then if they're exposed to a data breach and they could be exposed to identity theft, that they don't have the same protections they would when they shop at a local department store or do business with their local bank. I think we need to remedy that here in our government, and I respectfully ask your aye vote when you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Just a couple quick questions. You're stating there's no responsibility for the state for the cost to other small entities, counties, cities. Are you expecting them to insure?
There is clearly going to be a cost to agencies if they have a data breach.
Right.
But there is already a cost associated with this. Unfortunately, right now, that cost is passed on to the constituents that use these agencies, to the people in our districts that have had their information compromised and are then forced to go out and fix their credit or take legal action to repair whatever the damage was on their own. So to say that there's a new cost, I feel like this is just reshifting that cost back to the state agencies that allowed unencrypted information to be compromised that allowed to this data breach. So I would argue that this is not a new cost, but this is simply shifting this cost back to these agencies instead of on the taxpayers within our state.
Okay, thank you. Senator Leno, we are on item number 3, Assembly Bill 259. We've already heard arguments for and against. At this point, would you happen to have any questions at all? Okay, then great. Then we'll wait until we have a quorum and we can make a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have another item?
I do. I'll make it.
Great. And
make it a 2 for 1.
Item number 24, Assembly Bill 1131. Assemblyman DeBabney, you're on again. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair and colleagues, good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking the chair, even though she's not here today, currently for her work on this bill and her committee. I appreciate the thoughtful approach they took with my staff and with the Department of Insurance and supporters of this bill. This bill, with the prior opt-in consent of the consumer, AB 1131, would expand a life insurer's ability to transact electronically specified insurance-related documents in lieu of traditional mail. This is similar to how people in California already handle their automobile and property insurance. There is no reason why we can e-sign documents to purchase a home, book a flight, and pay car insurance, but we can't do the same to subscribe to life insurance currently. There is, excuse me, instead of being reactionary to technological advances, we should be utilizing these advances to improve efficiency and access for all our constituents. Concerns have been raised that some of our constituents might not be able to manage their insurance documents electronically. But it's important to note that these documents will only be sent with the prior consent of the consumer. So only consumers within our state that want to do these type of transactions electronically will be in a position to do so. Consumers that are not comfortable with electronic transition can still continue to do things through traditional means, including traditional mail. I want to reassure this committee that all existing consumer protections and rights to cancel under the current law remain intact with this bill. The bill provides a heightened delivery requirements for certain documents also. That being said, I commit to working with the chair of this committee and will amend the bill in the Senate appropriations to ensure consumers are protected. Amendments will be taken to address the following concerns. It will allow for electronic notices of pending lapse and termination of a life insurance policy to be sent to the designee or a known assignee chosen by the policyholder. The bill will mirror the liability of an insurance agent and brokers under an e-sign provision and provide ability for policyholder to electronically return a notice of cancellation as allowed under Uniform Electronic Transition Act currently. This bill passed through the Assembly Senate Insurance Committee on consent, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote when you get a quorum.
Great. We'd love to hear from your witnesses. 2 minutes each for 2 people. I want to get through this agenda before the chairwoman returns.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members. Robert Harrell, Deputy Insurance Commissioner representing the Department of Insurance. We're the sponsor of the measure. Just a little bit of context here. There was a bill 2 years ago that focused on the property casualty industry, e-renewals, if you will. We worked hard in negotiations on that bill. This is a similar, not exactly the same, but a similar kind of construct for the life and annuities area, if you will. There are some differences. The analysis does a very good and thorough job of rolling through the issues. As the author mentioned, it is an opt-in regime. We look forward to working with the committee staff, the other partners, and the author's office in this summer legislative recess on amendments rolling into the Senate Appropriations Committee, and we would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Norrell.
Mr. Vice Chair and members, Ted Angelo with the Association of California Life and Health Insurance Companies. We're kind of a sponsor of this legislation too, but we do, what I'd like to speak to today is just the number of consumer protections that are in place for those that would be utilizing this new availability of e-commerce, which in the home of Silicon Valley, it's hard to believe that California isn't quite here yet, but we do understand that consumer protections and that the regulator, as the Department of Insurance, is responsible for making sure everything that needs to go to consumers in the paper process happens electronically. We think that will be done, and we will work with the author to make sure that's done from our perspective, as we have liability for our agents and the companies that I represent. A number of protections. I have a senior insurance list of senior protections, as well as just general consumer protections for agents, brokers, and companies, many of which were put forward by some of the folks that are on this committee. Senator Leno had one a few years ago for seniors, for veterans protections, because there was a loophole in some of the protections that we had done when Senator Scott was doing suitability efforts that were ultimately codified by Mr. Blumenfield, who went back to Congress. But we have suitability protections in place for seniors, for all individuals prior to purchasing life insurance and annuity contracts. Every senior has a 30-day right to return. We think accountability under the electronic process will be even heightened because it's easy to track and trace everything that comes and goes from a person's computer or tablet or smartphone. And we will continue to work with the author on any protections that this committee and chair feels are necessary that were outlined in the analysis, and we appreciate your aye vote today.
Thank you, Mr. Angelo. Any other witnesses in support?
Mr. Chair, Mandy Lee with the American Council for Life Insurers. We're a national trade group representing the industry, very much in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Assemblyman Dababney, go ahead and close.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Very simply, current law must be updated to allow broader use of voluntary e-delivery and e-signature of life insurance documents. We've seen the benefit this has provided to other insurance industries, and we know that it will do similar for life insurance. In advancing this legislation, the life insurance industry and the Department of Insurance is attempting to meet the increasing demand of California consumers to conduct business electronically, and in doing so, take advantage of the convenience of e-delivery and e-signatures. As a state which is home to Silicon Valley, this is a very common sense approach. I really appreciate the work of this committee to help make sure this bill strikes the right balance. I thank the Department of Insurance and the supporters of this bill in an effort to work together to remove all opposition, and I respectfully ask your aye vote when you get a quorum.
Thank you very much. Senator Leno, any questions?
Just want to thank the Assemblyman for bringing the bill forward, but also for taking the committee suggested amendments. I think it'll improve the bill, and look forward to voting for it.
Senator, thank you. I appreciate your previous work on this subject.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who is next, Madam Clerk? Assemblyman Quirk, great. We're at item 2, Assembly Bill 56. Assemblyman Quirk, welcome.
It's good to meet you, Senator Morlock. And
likewise.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, Senator Leno, very good to see you today. First, let me say that I appreciate the thoughtful analysis done on this bill. There are a number of suggestions raised for consideration that would make the bill stronger, and I'd like to accept those as author amendments. These suggestions are outlined on page 9, 10, and 11 of the analysis. Drones can be of great service to the state, but left completely unregulated, there's a potential for abuse. AB 56 seeks to fill that void by establishing parameters around the operation of a drone. AB 56 does the following. First, it requires that law enforcement use a drone in compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, including the California Constitution, that specifies the right to privacy. Second, it requires law enforcement to develop policies that will guide the use of a drone. These policies will need to describe how privacy rights will be protected, training required, any individuals that operate the drone, how and what purpose data will be shared, protections against unauthorized access, and a guarantee against sole surveillance for activities protected by the First Amendment. Third, the bill requires the policy before it is finalized to be presented at a regularly scheduled meeting of the governing body and allow for public comment. Fourth, it requires law enforcement to specify how gathered data will be protected. Fifth, it requires a warrant for use of a drone over private property and when flying in other jurisdictions unless exigent circumstances exist. Sixth, the bill provides for an enforcement mechanism by allowing individuals to seek remedy should the drone be flown in a manner that is inconsistent with the provisions of the bill or the policies established by the law enforcement agency. Seventh, it requires that the policy be periodically reviewed to assess compliance with existing laws and regulation and identify potential risks to privacy and civil liberties. Drone regulation is a new area. California, like other states, is struggling to figure out what is the best approach. In bringing this together, I've had the ACLU on one side wanting to make the bill much stronger, the law enforcement agencies wishing to regulate it. I've tried to come up with something which I believe is the right mix of priorities. Thank you.
Confirm that your amendments are in accordance to the mock-up?
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any witnesses in support?
Mine is a lonely case.
Okay, we've got 300 people lined up in opposition. So.
All right.
No, I'm kidding. Anyone in opposition? Any discussion? Senator Leno? Oh, wait, we have some. Okay, thank you.
As I said, law enforcement and the ACLU. I can't do any better than that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members. Aaron McGuire on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association. We are currently opposed to this bill. We have been working with Assemblymember Quirk on various issues, and we've had actually a pretty excellent dialogue throughout the process. But the bill seems to be going in the wrong direction at this point. I have not seen the mock-up of the amendments. The points that were raised in the analysis, though, has us concerned about what those amendments exactly are. We think the right balance is that if someone doesn't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, that the rules that generally govern helicopters should apply to the drones, that you shouldn't have to get a warrant if a person or an entity is in a public place with no reasonable expectation of privacy. We think that's the proper approach to that, and for the most part, this bill provides for that. And we're happy that that's the direction that's been taken with respect to the warrant requirements. Unfortunately, there's other provisions now in the bill that are going to make it much more difficult for agencies to procure these. We think there's a real opportunity to use these devices in the service of, especially in search and rescue, or for surveying land for illegal marijuana grows or other instances where, again, we don't believe a warrant is required. So we have continuing concerns about how the language is utilized in terms of the procurement of these devices. We appreciate the fact that the board approval at the local level is no longer required, but we have concerns about how policies might be developed at an open board hearing. We don't think that's the appropriate avenue to develop policies that should be governing how law enforcement deploys these devices. We have been willing to work with the author. We continue to do so, but for now we remain opposed.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members. Kevin Baker from the American Civil Liberties Union of California. We think that the bill is actually maybe potentially going in the right direction, given the amendments that we also have not seen. We do think that the bill could be strengthened. In particular, we think that it would be appropriate to have additional civilian oversight over these policies so that elected officials are involved in the approval of the policies. Right now, as proposed, the bill simply gives the discretion to local law enforcement to draft those policies in any fashion that they choose. Nevertheless, we think the bill is moving in the right direction. We think it's important that the public and law enforcement agencies be given clear guidance and rules about this as opposed to simply follow the Constitution. But we would like to see the additional amendments and look forward to working with the author.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Any other witnesses in opposition? Any comments, Senator Leno?
Over here. Samantha,
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'm sorry.
Samantha Corbin on behalf of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We were actually neutral on previous versions of the bill up until the last round of amendments. We haven't seen the ones that the author is taking today. Our concerns are similar to ACLU's. Also, many of our concerns stem from the removal of non-LEA public agencies in recent amendments, but we have been talking to the author's office to see if there's any middle ground moving forward.
Thank you, Ms. Gorman. Thank you for forgiving me. Any other witnesses in opposition? Assemblymember Quirk, why don't you go ahead and close?
All right. With regard to helicopters, drones are very different. With helicopter, you can fly over someone's private property that's been allowed. And it's allowed in part because it's considered that with an aircraft or a helicopter, that's something that happens from time to time. These are expensive. People don't use them without a great deal of interest. Whereas with the drone, it's extremely cheap to fly. So we think that there is an additional level of concern with the drone. We took out the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We took out the non-law enforcement parts. Simply because the bill was, as it went from committee to committee, was getting more complex than we would like. We would be glad to take that on another bill, but we just felt at this time it wasn't appropriate. We definitely allow for search and rescue if there's any concerns about that. We really will work very hard with you to make sure that's okay. Exigent circumstances, a warrant, you can go where you want. Those are all things that we definitely want to allow. In terms of search for cannabis, that should be fine over public property, which is a major concern. For private property, we believe it has the same protections as you would if you were looking, again, under someone's private property. For local government while we don't insist that they approve, they can, in fact, if they wish, look at more restrictions on the use of drones, which is something that we do allow. And we are recognizing in the right of the sheriffs to do their domain to come up with their own guidelines as long as the public gets a chance to comment. The local agencies may, in fact, have other things that they're concerned about, but we think it is the right of the sheriffs to do those to do the guidelines for their department. Yes, I guess I do. Thank you very much, Senator.
Okay, Senator Leno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Authoring a bill can be a lonely experience at times. I just want to let you know that you've got many by your side. I think this is a great improvement over the status quo. And I know that it's a tug of war at times. You move in one direction to appease one concern. You lose some support on the other side. That said, I do want to encourage you to consider a more explicit warrant requirement. I know that there is one now on private property, that's my understanding, but that if we're going to have law enforcement following us around on public property, there should be some reasonable cause that I'm committing a crime. And I would agree with you, this is so very different from a helicopter, not only for the reasons that you've said, but you know when a helicopter is over your head. Yeah. You don't know when a drone is over your head, and of course they're operated remotely as well, so they can get into all sorts of areas that helicopters not going to. So I know this is going to get to judiciary as well, and I'll be seeing you, excuse me.
We're in judiciary.
We're in judiciary.
You saw it before.
We saw it in public safety, but just want to continue to encourage you for that more explicit warrant requirement.
We will work with the stakeholders and the governor's office and see what we can come up with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I think you're moving in the right direction.
All right.
Thank you.
And when we get our quorum, I'll be happy to move the bill.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.